Hello, everyone. My name is Rich Rogers, and I'm excited to talk to you about Star Wars Saturdays. I've got a couple of fantastic cohorts who've been part of Star Wars Saturdays with me. There have been a large number, but Anish and Will have happily agreed. I don't know. I mean, happy is a little assumptive. They have agreed to partake in the fun of talking a little bit about Star Wars Saturdays. What is it? And also, how do we make it work? Let's get started. The presentation outline is simple. We'll talk about what Star Wars Saturdays is, what the pitch is to people who come and play in the game, as well as what games have we run in Star Wars and why we've chosen those games. The RPG conversion tips, where Will and Undish will definitely help me out. We'll talk about some specific examples, Bounty of the Week and Stars in the Dark and Hutt Cartel. Then just some general tools to make things a little more Star Warsy, followed by a Q&A. Now, the Q&A is, we're going to be taking questions not only from some folks who are here live in the Zoom meeting. So if we get to that point and you want to jump in, feel free to let us know in chat and you can ask the question live. And then we have in the GCOG Discord channel, there's a panel channel. So folks who are participating in our Gauntlet Community Open Gaming weekend, feel free to hop in and ask us questions, and we'll get to that shortly. So let's move on. What's the Star Wars Saturdays pitch? Star Wars Saturdays started in December 2017, so we're coming up on our 4th year. The very first game was Star Wars World, this PBTA hack from Andrew Medeiros. Star Wars Saturdays are open to anyone who's seen the original Star Wars trilogy, because if you haven't, why are you here? Go watch those. They're awesome. Frequently, players in Star Wars Saturdays games know more about Star Wars than the GM. We're looking at you, Cody and Sabine. The only things that are 100% true in Star Wars Saturdays series are the original trilogy of movies and whatever has happened in our games. I do have a wiki that we update, and it's delightful when players will volunteer to create wiki entries for their own characters, but I do my best to at least put up the links for the YouTube sessions as we go. Sometimes we pull ideas and characters from the expanded universe of Star Wars, but often it will only exist for that series. Players are encouraged to create their own canon. We have things where folks replay their previous player characters, reinterpret them in different systems, such as there's this Kel Trazik, I believe, Will. How many different systems have you played Kel in?
3, I think, so far.
Nice.
Never to be anywhere near Cartel. Until I'm done with him.
You like him too much. Janila Jantek, which is Jolene's character, she's played Janila in every time that Joe makes it in, and Jolene's been in a large number. Check the wiki entry because it's dizzying. Zudo is a character from early on in Star Wars Saturdays days that Michael Barford played. It's really cool. Some people create families of characters like Grask and Zyro, and the Unbound, which is Sabine's thing. The Sunfells, a couple of characters. We've had sisters, uncles, and the like. And then some folks will pick up NPCs from previous games that they played in, such as Lepi named Tevi and Zashta the Togruta. We also have our species experts. Stephen Watkins, who's actually in this Zoom call, is our Jawa expert. I mean, there are other people who play Jawas, but Stephen is more likely to be playing a Jawa. And then Blazebear, who plays Trandoshans extremely well. So this is a gigantic list. I'm not even going to read it, but these are the RPGs for Star Wars Saturdays over the last 4 years. Down here on the bottom right-hand corner are from the Star Wars Saturday Special Edition. So some of the large number of these I haven't had the chance to play in, but they were run by a variety of GMs across that weekend. Another one's coming up this December. Very excited. But as you can see, we run the gamut for different indie and small press RPGs. And yeah, you might notice a lack of a particular RPG type, that Edge of the Empire. I've heard about that one, at Star Wars D6. I don't know, like those things. So I guess that leads to a question.
So, Rich, there are actual licensed Star Wars RPGs, right? So what's the deal with all these hacks, man? Why don't you just run these Fantasy Flight games?
All the work's been done for me. That's true. Why don't I? I think it's a trap. See, the Gauntlet community, we enjoy small press, indie, and OSR tabletop RPGs. In the past, all of us, Will, Undershin, and I know I have played Weston Games Star Wars D6 RPG, WotC's D20 Saga Edition, and Fantasy Flight's Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, all of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars RPGs. And they are great games, but they're either built for a long haul, take a lot of time to teach and learn. GMs have to like stat up threats and roll their own dice. I mean, what are you trying to do? Make me work here, Will? Come on, you're asking a lot.
Yeah,
So,
but we also just want to play games, right? And I think if you look at that list, it's like a driver, right? Like how many of us would have got these games to the table if it wasn't for the fact that we looked at them and went, you know what, this would be really cool in Star Wars, and it's so open and accessible, right?
It's very true. It's embarrassing how there's a Halloween sale on Drive-Thru RPG, and I might be going through there going, could I make this scary RPG into a Star Wars game?
Yes, the well-known horror genre of Star Wars. Like, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
The final goes in there, so.
Oh, it's true. It's true. It's true. So what's the best RPG for a Star Wars game then? People have asked me that. Undersh, what do you think? What's the best RPG for a Star Wars game? We've run so many.
Yeah, I mean, different games do different things, and we want to do different things. There are so many games, and it's fun to try them out. Doing it in Star Wars, it makes for an easy entry point. You don't have to explain a whole lot of background and lore. People who are interested in Star Wars know enough about Star Wars to play any game set in Star Wars. I think that's the main point there.
Yeah, I think there's no one true wayism that we need to have in RPGs. And I do love the idea of jumping in and just focusing on that game and what that game's about, because you don't have to worry about as much world building. We know there are lightsabers, we know there are Jawas, we know there are droids, all that good stuff. Andisha, if you could keep talking, tell us a little bit about some of your thoughts about how to convert an RPG that was not originally created for Star Wars into something that works in Star Wars.
Yeah. The first point here is, I think that's the key point. You don't want to try to force the game to be something else than what it wants to be. If a game is set up to be something particular, and that's true of nearly all indie games, you should let it be that. But then maybe you can find a way to let it be that in Star Wars. So you can find something in Star Wars that matches what that game is and what that game wants to be, so that you can put it into Star Wars without having a conflict between the game and the setting. And then the conversion, just giving things different names. If something is rifle, you make it a blaster rifle. If something is a grenade, you make it a thermal detonator. If there's vehicles, you can almost certainly find something that matches what you need, because there is so much lore for Star Wars, so many things that people have come up with, that you'll be able to find matches for almost everything.
I usually think that step one in running this is just to say, like, whenever you see a word that I haven't changed into the Star Warsy version, please just say the Star Warsy version rather than like,
Yeah.
Absolutely. I found, and I now stick that in the keepers for games, someone put on Wikipedia, which is a godsend. It does so much of your work for you. But in Wikipedia, a everyday items in Star Wars list, and just that list is so cool. Oh, it's no longer coffee. It's like calf. It's no longer a flashlight or a torch. It's a glow rod. It's very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, that goes a long way. And the same thing with the slang terms, especially the bad curse words. It's good to be able to say cark and piece of poodoo instead of just using English or American slang. It helps a lot with getting the feel right. And then just making it easy for the players. The species helper that Rich has put together is incredibly useful. You just have the various species, some sample names, short background information so that you know roughly what they are, and then you can just pick it up and go. Because We all know that the people who are most interested in keeping things consistent and such with Star Wars are the viewers, not the creators. So, and when we're playing, we're creators. We get to do what we want. So,
certainly not George Lucas, right? Everybody else has to work around George Lucas's vision.
Exactly.
And
yeah,
that's how the players do it, right? Is that everybody just says like, well, we know what they were on screen, but here's how they are everywhere else. And maybe I haven't read the 3,000 books that's about the Ewok village or whatever, right? But in this Ewok tribe, they do that kind of stuff.
Exactly. I guess it's like playing D&D. You have to play around Gary Gygax a lot. But,
I think that's part of I mean, on the other end of that scale, like the freedom and everything, there's the rough timeline of like where it exists in the stuff, because we have so many different distinct visions of Star Wars, from the movies, the games, the stuff from like the Knights of the Old Republic through to like the new trilogy and then the original ones and all of that. I often think like when you look at these RPGs and they've got this particular sense, like a time or a place, right? Like the Revolutionaries one is like, that's got to be the rebellion, right? Or like the Night Witches, that's also got to be during like the Galactic Civil War, really, hasn't it? But the D&D style games, that really seems to belong more in the Knights of the Old Republic kind of era, when the Jedi are running around everywhere and shooting. And so the timeline, but broadly, you're in this ballpark of the setting.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we talked a bit about generalities for converting an RPG to Star Wars, but let's do some actual case examples here. Let's talk about Bounty of the Week. So Bounty of the Week started off as a Monster of the Week hack. And I swear to you, I started it before The Mandalorian came out. But it really is so Mandalorian. It's kind of crazy. The first time I ran Monster of the Week, it really was just changing a bunch of names of things to sound Star Warsy. But over the past few years, it really has grown, and we've like forked it and folded things back in. So, Will, you've run Bounty of the Week. Talk to me a little bit about what you've done with it.
So, we have your original just complete reskin. I think that was the very first Star Wars Saturday game I played. And then we played a series of David, who's on the call here, who made like a more in-depth one that had like a ship mechanics, and it had different moves for the different books. Reflavored it a lot more, condensed some of the classes and made it all really there. And then we sort of like forked off again from that, back a bit, like I think looping back towards the original Monster of the Week a little bit, and then off again. And then I took a look at what you were doing, and I was like, well, I like that, and I'm going to run this with my like hometown in real life group, because you can bring Star Wars to anyone, right? And even these RPG newbies who just played Monster of the Week, Bounty of the Week was perfect for them. And I just kind of made up my own drifts as we were going in that game. But the whole concept of it just really works, because it's Bounty of the Week. That's the Mandalorian. It's Bounty of the Week with an ongoing plot. Monster of the Week is Monster of the Week, and the mechanics and everything work so well to go back together there. And I think our major drift apart originally was ships, right? Like, because we all, everyone's familiar with the struggle of ships in RPGs, right? Like, how do you manage them without them becoming a whole crunch in a different game? But then David had some really cool, like, ship, like a whole part of the ship game that I really loved interacting with. But I did struggle sometimes from like the player-driven bit to the ship parts of it. And you took him out entirely, didn't you? Just smooth running at first, like wanted to focus on the hunts rather than like the ship itself and all of that.
Yeah, I did. It was cool. And I saw like there was some inspiration from Impulse Drive, which is a fantastic game. But I was like, oh, this is a whole layer of extra bits that is too much for me. So I stripped it all away. And then afterwards realized, oh man, like this also answers some things that I want, which is the money, right? Because in Monster of the Week, players aren't really motivated by money. They don't care about the job and getting paid. But Mandalorian, and also I think our vision of how bounty hunters work in Star Wars.
You have a bounty board, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Everyone always goes for the biggest job on the board. Every single time you put this in front of players, they're always like, well, that one's worth more like alive, and that one's, and then they just look at the number and they go like, I want 20 units rather than 5 units. So, yeah.
And what's funny is we bounce between like Star Wars, but really a lot of my feel for how bounty hunters work is probably more influenced by Cowboy Bebop than Star Wars, because until Mandalorian came out, bounty hunters were Boba Fett and some dudes that showed up in Empire Strikes Back, you know?
And Westerns, right? Like, just like
Yes.
George Lucas rips off Westerns entirely, like it all feeds, that's where he got the idea for bounty hunters, right?
Mm-hmm. And the whole money cycle has been an ongoing thing. I feel like having a ship and having things you want to pay for is a great motivator. But then I played Neon City Overdrive, and that had a really cool abstracted money system that tied into retirement. I know I'm tying money and retirement, and we got luck in the middle. But the retirement role to me was super fascinating. Now, it does mean you're not going to play, this isn't your forever game, right? You're playing towards retirement. And some people get tweaked by that. Some people are like, I love my guy. Like, I don't know, this Will guy who doesn't want to play Kel in any kind of cartel game because he's going to get carking shot and die.
But Kel's retirement in Bounty of the Week would have been finish my time as a bounty hunter and join the rebellion or something, right? Like, that was minimum my drive to retire. And like, the money and the creds would have been the reason why I have to just do one more job to get out there, right? I agree. The retirement, I think it gives each character like their own arc, and I haven't had a chance to really explore that in play. I saw there's just the start of it with the group I was running for before life got in the way and we had to sort of, too many disruptions to really do that linked narrative. But like one of the like the trainee character had found a lightsaber in a Sith temple. The droid couldn't remember where he'd put it when he took it away from her, and we had all those things moving towards their drives. And the money, it was there because it's relatively easy to just spend all your money. And if you do a bounty, you could pay off all your retirement in one go. But that's not why you play, right? You play to play the game, and it's like give you the odds and everything. And I, after playing Red Markets for a bit, I was like, I like that it's a contested resource. You've got your drive. That's really how your character's going to get out of this in one piece and then succeed in their goals. But then you've got the money that you got to spend on your ship, in my case, and the money that you've got to spend on kit, on health, on everything. Like, just make sure that money only means something if it has costs, right? And that's where it usually falls down in D&D, where 100 gold means that I never need to work again. I can afford every inn for the rest of my life, right?
I think it's really interesting coming up with Red Markets influencing your ideas and vision for Bounty of the Week, how it's really going to shape where you take your fork of the game. And I'm real happy with retirement and money being a motivator with some tactical choices in between and downtime sessions, but like the hunts and also the relationship of the bounty hunting crew is really my focus. So I want to see where you're headed next, because as this thing continues to grow and develop on your side, it's exciting to see a much grittier, kind of hard Scrabble bounty hunter game.
Yeah, we're you're the Mandalorian and we're the story of Boba Fett or whatever, right? Like the book of Boba Fett. Sorry, yeah. But I mean, you were the one who got rid of luck in your game. So like in Monster of the Week, you have luck that you can use to get a 10 plus roll essentially on anything, if you ever negate any harm. And it's your get out of jail 3 card. And we've played it with luck and we've played it without luck. And then Rich used the call for aid, like, ask another player for help and see if the character can help out some way, and that like boosts your roll entirely. I don't know what game that was from.
Legacy,
yeah. And that like really does negate the need for luck, and in my view gives it a chance to be even more hard Scrabble, because if you went off on your own and you got in over your head, then I can just bleed you dry because there's no one there to help you with your things,
Yeah, I love it. I remember talking to you like, tell V if I'm stupid, Will. But I think I want more people to use call for aid. I want to incentivize that. And the only way I can do that is to take away this crutch of luck. And
I think it really forces, because everyone's got a different drive, right? They're not overlapping. The common goal is to earn money in the bounty hunters group. Like most of the people that Mandalorian teams up with are only there for like one episode to do moral things, or ostensibly it's all like for the money, right? So like these are the reasons why you do team up with each other, is because otherwise you're going to get carking shot, right? Like and then you owe them.
Yeah. Anything more on Bounty of the Week you wanted to discuss?
No, I definitely it's on my top of my list of things that I want to run as my next series for sure.
Can't wait. Now we're going to talk about another use case. Undish, you have been running Stars in the Dark. So what is Stars in the Dark? That sounds really cool.
Well, you should know.
I'm playing dumb.
yeah. You're so good at it. You're fooling me. Stars in the Dark is a very light reskin of Blades in the Dark to Star Wars. It's set on Coruscant on level 1313, one of the infamous crime-ridden places on Coruscant. I went with Blades in the Dark rather than Scum and Villainy or some other. One, because I wanted to learn Blades in the Dark, because I had started to hack it and realized there were a lot of things I didn't know. And reskinning a game is a great way to learn it, because you have to, when you have to change names for things, you have to figure out what they are. And that means you need to get a better understanding of the game. And I also wanted to run a game about a particular gang in a particular place rather than a group of characters who were flying around between planets. So I worked heavily through the character keeper. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that. I think, can I share my screen?
Let me stop share, and then you should be able to share. Is
that showing up now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is based on a Blades in the Dark character keeper who Misha shared with me. Unfortunately, I've lost the link to the original. It had aged out of the Slack, so I couldn't find it. And this is the first version. I've remade it a bit since then, but that's not important to this. So this is Rich's character, and as you can see, all of this part is it's straight up Blades in the Dark. I've just changed the names of some things, and otherwise this is exactly a Blades in the Dark character keeper. What I have added are some of these pop-up notes where you can have some rules information. It's particularly useful for gear in a Blades game, because slicing tools, what does that mean? What is subterfuge supplies in Star Wars? So you can have some notes without it taking up a lot of space. I added this little thing just to have there's so much information for each character. You have to have a separate tab for each character, but I wanted to have some information so you could see the other characters. So there's a bit of linking between the pages. The crews are also just straight up. Some things have been renamed, same rules, content.
Very, very excited to see the Etem as a character in Blaze in the Dark. Just to interrupt briefly, but
he's
way more effective.
Yeah, I can imagine. The world's worst spy, but probably the world's best cutter, I guess, in this.
Yeah, the cutter, the gun hand. Yep.
She's really good at that. She's really good at killing people. The faction tab, I did the same thing here. I added some notes because it's easier than to have everything. I put in a map. This is very, very basic overview map, because I feel like when you're in a location-based or setting-based game like Blades is, it's very useful to have some geography, just some basics, so you know where you are, and you don't have to ask the GM every time, oh, is it far from here to there, and that sort of thing. You can just look at the map and you have a rough feel for it.
Undish, before we move on, someone in the Zoom call, Will, not the Will, but our other Will, asked, how much time did you spend renaming all the factions?
It didn't take as long as it might seem, because this depends on what kind of person you are, I guess. I have for me, it's easy to come up with names and this type of ideas. I'm bad at plots, but I'm good at this sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know, a couple of hours maybe. That wasn't the hard part for me. I want to show the bit that was hard, and that's the rules tab. And this is a big messy thing where I put in most of the rules that you need during the game. It's not everything, it's not every detail. I don't have the invention rules, for example, because I haven't figured those out yet. But I wanted to put in most of the rules so that you can just have everything in the character keeper.
I don't think
Yes.
anyone has figured out the invention rules in Blades in the Dark. Every single time it comes up, it's always just like you start a clock, and I guess you get a thing. But wow, you've got like the whole SRD here, pretty much.
Yeah,
Great.
almost.
Yeah.
And I've used a lot of colors because at least for me, colors help me orient myself. You recognize the pattern of the colors and you know where you are. Since there's a lot of information, it's important to be able to find them reasonably quickly. And then there's the standard things. There's an NPCs tab. There's a locations tab with some pictures just so you can know roughly what things look like. It helps with the visualization. And of course, Rich's species helper I talked about before. I think we can stop sharing this now.
Wait, before you stop sharing it,
Yeah.
one thing, pop back to that factions and please highlight the faction of the Skywalkers, because that write-up is the best thing
Skywalkers,
ever.
I really
Yeah.
wanted to ask about the Skywalkers.
Yeah.
So
The
what is
religious
this?
vigilantes. They haven't
Love
run
it.
into those yet. They have run into the Dark Lord's faithful.
Are the
Ooh.
Skywalkers like those guys in the hockey pads in Batman, running around?
Maybe.
Like, yeah.
We don't know yet.
I am thrilled and terrified, and they are tier 2 and we're still tier 0, so that will hand us our shebs, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some general character keeper stuff in here. Like I mentioned, the colors, tick boxes and conditional formatting. This I didn't show any of that now, but actually the colors on the faction sheet, you saw there were different colors for the factions, the status. That's something I put in with conditional formatting. So I just need to change the number and it changes the color. And that sort of thing it's not super tricky to do, but sometimes you have to fiddle around with it a bit to get it to work well. But and that's not almost none of what I've said here is specific to Star Wars, really. But when I did the reskin, what I wanted to do was as little work as possible, but still make it Star Wars. So I did a lot of renaming and I spent a lot of time on Wikipedia just finding equivalents, and you figure out, oh, there's all this, the leech in Blades in the Dark has a lot of drugs and poisons and that sort of thing. You figure, oh, I'm going to have to make up a lot of stuff. And then you start looking at truth drugs in Star Wars, and there's like 10 of them at least. So it's just, oh, this one matches.
And if you don't find anything, you just make it up, right? Like, and you just
Yeah,
give it like
yeah.
the Star Trekky kind of like tech talk treatment, where you just tachyon function whatever, right? Becomes kyber crystal thing.
Yeah,
But
and I don't mind making things up for myself, but
Yeah.
when someone else has already done it, it's
Yeah.
just easy.
But I think that's a good demonstration of like how changing the character keeper, because I just used what existed and then tweak it, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
I hate fiddling around with all the tick boxes, condition. If you see that in any of my character keepers, it's because Rich made it first and I just ripped it off, and then I break it by tweaking it where I want. But the one thing that I do always make sure to work is like the names of the guns and the weapons. Like the cartel assassin no longer has like a Barrett M55 sniper rifle. They've got a like personal turbo laser cannon or something, right? And yeah. I think it's a good exercise in when you are converting it, right? As you go through every bit of like the character sheets to turn them into, which you otherwise would just kind of go, if I do everything broad, everybody else can do the lifting on there, right? But like, it helps you think of the whole thing.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a great way to learn the game, because for a lot of these games, you're running it for the first time. If you have to go through everything in detail because you have to check what everything's called and find something Star Warsy to replace the name with, that means you have to think about, what is this thing? What's its function in the game? And that helps a lot with learning it.
I found from playing, I've had the joy of playing the session 0 and I think 4 full sessions now, and it's the most fun I've had playing Blades in the Dark. And the system is really, really strong and deep. The reskin that you've done on it has unlocked I didn't love Blades a whole lot in the previous times I played it, but now that I've seen it in a setting that I can get my mind around, it's like, wow, really, really cool. And I was one of the people who said, why don't you just do Scum and Villainy? Like, why not? It's already done for you. But it really is tonally and genre-wise a very, very different game from Scum and Villainy.
Yeah, I've run a couple of sessions of Scum and Villainy, but it was a while ago, so I can't really compare the two. But just the fact that in Blades, you're a bottom tier crew. You're living on the street, taking whatever jobs you can get. While in Scum and Villainy, it tilts much more towards the adventure side of things. And I don't think either is bad. I think you can do a great Star Wars game in Scum and Villainy. It just wasn't the game that I wanted to run because I wanted the grubby stuff.
So good. Anything more about Stars in the Dark you want to share with us?
I'm having a lot of fun running it. I don't know how long it will go on, but right now I feel like it could go on for years and years because it's super fun.
Thank you very much, Anish. Now, Will and I are going to talk about a crazy hack. So Hut Cartel, as you can see from the logo, my Photoshop skills are not incredible, but I just took the cartel. Cartel is this incredibly interesting and dangerous little Mexican narco fiction game that Marquez Truman created. And it's hard to get people to try it, to be honest with you. I've played a good number of sessions of Cartel, and I mean, Hut Cartel is just a phrase from Star Wars, and I created this hack almost on a lark, but it was the first definitely your mama's Star Wars game that I ran for Star Wars Saturdays. I think Bounty of the Week was close, but yeah, once I went into the Cartel territory.
Yeah, Hut Cartel is you know, The Wire, Sopranos, etc. in space, right? Whereas in one particular scummy 1313 area, typically, right? Like the deepest bowels of Coruscant. Whereas Bounty of the Week, and I mean, you know, I'm not going to judge on who came up with it first, right? But it is The Mandalorian in its tone, right? Like it's fun, pulpy action kind of stuff. Whereas this is 18 rated Star Wars, and it does seem atonal, but in a way it makes Cartel more approachable as well. Sometimes, you know, like you've got the distance of, well, it's like in Mandalorian, they kill hundreds of stormtroopers. At the end of the series, they're having a touching moment with Luke Skywalker surrounded by dead people.
Yeah.
But no one cares because it's just shot in a different way, right? Whereas Cartel's the one where it's like the bloody shootout turns into a big scandal, into a ever cluster cark of stuff. So, and I mean, that kind of ties in with like what makes an 18 rated thing is I think one of the things that we had to change or like approach differently in Hut Cartel was like that civilian life, you know, the normality that's disrupted, because in Star Wars they're disrupted by big events, you know, like the Death Star, the rebels striking or whatever, right? Like the Jedi among them or something. But in Cartel it's like this is everyday life for people, right? Like there's a civilian life. There are people who go around who are not involved in the cartels, but then there's the cartel life, and this is just what's happening under the New Republic, the Empire. No matter what it is, the scum and villainy persists below, right? And no matter who changes at the top, this grungy underworld exists. And so, you know, you have to accommodate the lack of how we don't really see any depictions of people getting married and having families and what that looks like. There's no consistent sort of like innocent life in Star Wars. Everyone's 1 second away from being a rebel spy and then being recruited to save the galaxy or getting shot as an extra in one of them. And, you know, by focusing on that story, it lets you really lean into some really of like the darker sides of the Star Wars universe. The actual scum and villainy, the brutality of the Black Sun and the Hut cartels and everything. And you like get to do something that's not really common in a lot of Star Wars stuff, which is like make everybody and everything tainted, dirty. Nothing is, you know, we all play PBTA and everything comes at a price, right? Well, in Cartel, even your 10 pluses come at a price because success in Cartel is success at being a bad person. And Star Wars is a universe where there are good people and bad people. and you are not playing the good people. So it's a lot of buy-in, but I love it. And two of you guys played here, and I had a hell of a lot of fun playing with all of you here. In fact, actually, now that I look.
Absolutely. I try real hard in the pitch. Like whenever I post it up, I try very hard to make it clear that this is not the shiny hat. This is not the original trilogy. While, that's you must be this tall to ride in Star Wars Saturdays. This is Rogue One. This is certain parts of the Clone Wars series, but it's not very prevalent in most of the media of Star Wars that are touchstones for people. So it is very, like you said, The Wire, is very Breaking Bad. In fact, you've got the cook who is just lifted from Breaking Bad. But not all of Cartel ports. Oh, go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, well, it's the same point I think you're about to approach. The cook, for me, strangely works better in Star Wars than he does in the normal version, because in the normal version, you just always feel like you're playing Walter White to an extent. You are playing an XP of that guy. Whereas in the Star Wars world, some guy who got roped in over his head because he's some whiz kid engineer or whatever, and has concoct some strange frothing smoky substance that gets people high in a nebulous way, and he's in that's exactly the sort of character that one of the main Star Wars people would have a debt with and has to come and rescue or something in one of the side plots. So yeah, they fit pretty well in that, more than I think they do in the normal Cartel game. But then conversely, we have what I think you're about to talk about.
Yeah, so the Mexican narco fiction of Cartel also has a lot of the telenovela spice in it, with a particular playbook called The Spouse. And it's a it's La Esposa, which, because Spanish is a gendered language, but you can play the husband to a male or female or gender non-specific, whatever. In Cartel, you are the one who's married. You're the partner of the drug lord. And it's really interesting in Cartel. I've loved the games I've sat in or run where we had a husband and wife or domestic partners, whatever, of The Spouse is very getting in people's business and worried about the family. And we had a couple of games where The Spouse was played in Hut Cartel, and you and I were always talking on the back channel of like, this move doesn't, like, it works because we all tilted our head and said, yeah, that's fun.
It always references the family, right? And savings, right. and like your social soirees and stuff like that. And it's like, but in the Star Wars universe, family is just the people that you have to go and rescue from the Imperials, or who kept the secret of your birth from you, or whatever, right? Like it's hard to have that mundane, that domestic life kind of stuff.
Jabba doesn't put on a tuxedo and go to a fancy dinner party. It's just he's Jabba all the time. So
he's all Jabba all the time. And that's the other piece of Cartel, just like pocketed in there, is that a lot of the ties between the PCs are all, this is your cousin, or this is, and when, let's be honest, you play Star Wars, you get a chance to play an alien race, I'm lucky to have a token human in a group. So the idea of a Rhodian and a Wookiee being cousins, it doesn't jive so well. So that family bit of The Spouse, it doesn't land as well as I liked. So on a lark, I started hacking The Spouse into the protocol droid, because there were a lot of that domestic issues. And let's be honest, there's some moves in The Spouse that are very, I'm going to cry until I get my way, that a protocol droid was like, oh man, would that click in? And we've had...
Who knew C-3PO was The Spouse the entire time, right? Like, yeah.
But Stephen gave it a shot and played a protocol droid, and the most duplicitous protocol droid you have ever seen. But it was really, really cool. It was hand in glove, and I was so happy that it worked as well as it did. And that was nice, because it was one of those, this is a fun playbook, and now the moves are just twisted just a little bit. And I don't think it's perfect. I still think there's a few rough edges that we can hone if we can get another chance to play Hut Cartel with a protocol droid in there.
Well, I definitely want to play more Hut Cartel, because one of the things, we're talking like Cartel is a story about a very local kind of area, and like crimes, it's big crime, it's, it's huge money and everything, right? But it's all in Coruscant on 1313. It's the drug trade, right? It doesn't really intersect with like the rebellion and the Galactic Civil War and all of that stuff. But You know what? While I was reading Cartel and I was thinking, I was watching Narcos on TV when we originally played Hook Cartel, and I was just like, well, the rebellion, the New Republic, and the Empire, they're in a kind of Cold War, and then what happens in a Cold War is you have lots of proxies, and the CIA can basically be like the NRI, and the Empire has got the ISB, and it's all like taking place in the criminal shadow world, and I take some of your characters from previous sessions of Star Wars Sundays, like Garrick, the NRI agent who keeps popping up everywhere, or the sinister benefactor of Kel, and they become Etima's handlers, right? And then that adds this whole other layer of like secrets. The stuff that's going on in the shadows of the Galactic Civil War is not just the criminal trade, but even the war gets everywhere, right? Even into the drug trade. And it just Etima, who we saw there from Blades in the Dark, that was a rebel spy who you can take you can make someone from 1313 a rebel spy, but then they're going to blow it up afterwards. Yeah, I really enjoyed Hook Cartel. I mean, I'd love to explore more of that. So when the Cold War supplement comes out, I plan on hacking the hell out of that as well. The CIA agent became the rebel spy. If they've got some sort of like counterpart to that, or like a freedom fighter / paramilitary class or whatever, that'll be perfect.
Talk to us a little bit about the deck of locations. So you're going to add in Cold War when it comes out, but the deck of locations has come out. Talk about that.
Cartel has this wonderful little deck of cards, which are different locations, and I've always struggled with location-based moves in PBTA games. If you'd like to go to the next slide there. So what we do in Hook Cartel was I asked the players, and we came up with different locations, and I threw a few out there from previous games and stuff. And then I would just go through the deck of locations, and I would find like a move that sort of fit with that place. Like we had Refuge 1313, the sort of like the free clinic being run by an ex-Imperial with a guilty conscience, another former PC. And that became the scene of a whole murder crime, shooting, police shooting, etc. Led to, I think, 2 PCs deaths, that whole thing. And then we had the fighting pit where Black Sun ran it out of there, and that's got a custom move for, I think that was the, well, originally we had it as, I think, like the wrestling arena, and then we changed it to the vet when 1313 got shut down. So we turned it to, where do you go when you're really patched up? Well, you go to where, Jabba's palace with those monsters inside. Like, who's going to patch you up when the doctor's in hospital? It's going to have to be Jabba's vet. He's going to stitch you together afterwards, and let's see how scarred you are. And of course, the Tenwa clan, our clan of Jawas who pop up everywhere on 1313, were the natural choices to be the arms dealer. And with Rebellion and the Imperials flooding the black market with weaponry, everyone's got to have a big gun, right? And it makes Cartel a very, I don't know if Star Wars Hook Cartel is more shooty than normal Cartel, for sure, I think.
It's pretty shooty. We definitely have more PC deaths in Hut Cartel games than I would say any other. Yeah, cool. Anything more on Hut Cartel you wanted to talk about, Will?
No, I'm all done.
I just wanted to mention that I have a particularly soft spot for Hut Cartel, since it was the first game I played on the Gauntlet.
That's right. You're assassin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So now we're going to talk a little more specifically about things you can do to Star Warsify stuff. This is just a list. I'm not going to go through everything, but you can get Zoom backgrounds. We will share this presentation and link it in the YouTube video so you can go in and look at it. This is a Gauntlet Play Aids folder. Anyone who doesn't know about this thing, it's maybe the most powerful resource for playing tabletop RPGs online. It's all free. It's all provided by the Gauntlet, created, maintained by the Gauntlet. It's there for you. You do not have to be a Gauntlet member to utilize it. So please, as part of the GCOG, jump in, grab some. Character Keeper template. I created one where I just stripped out some of those bits. Star Wars color palettes are linked here. Lines and veils, cats, those safety tools are absolutely critical. The names and species helper tab, Wikipedia, which we all use incessantly. Some maps and deck plans are always a great idea. And then I've got that wiki that I mentioned before, which you can go and look at most any recorded session of a Star Wars Saturdays game. So let's talk a little bit about how to make it Star Warsy. The crawl is a thing that I love. It takes a little more setup, so I don't use it as much as I should, I must say. There are so many times where I'm like, I'm going to do a crawl, and then I end up working on the Character Keeper or doing something else. and that's a bummer.
I will
Slang.
never do it, but I always love it.
Well, now that I figured out how to share sound with the video in a Zoom call, that's so much better, because I used to have to like stick my speakers near and there was echo and it was janky. Now I can just do it in Zoom. Pictures, Pinterest, voice mod, which I just mentioned earlier. That is the best thing ever. I love voice mod. I'm so addicted to it. And I've just been using it more for droid voices. So good, you guys. It's the best like $40 I've ever spent on a gaming app of any kind. Other things that are Star Wars adjacent: action, occasionally cute characters, sound effects, lightsabers. It's weird, but for some reason people want to do lightsabers all the time, all Jedi all the time. A brief aside, Star Wars Visions, very fun. It's the anime series from 7 different production studios, Japanese production studios, doing their take on Star Wars, and every damn one of them was about Jedi. Except for Tatooine Rhapsody. But it tells you a lot about, that's the grabby part. So if you've got folks that are coming in straight from the trilogy, stick in some Jedi stuff. Just do it. It's cool. But the most important part for me is that Star Wars is the backdrop. It's the language that we talk in, but it's really about the characters that the players have created. I make it a point to never have them go shake hands with Luke Skywalker. But to me, that steals the limelight from what the characters are accomplishing. And I think that's a real oversight for some GMs that I've played with. They're like, oh, well, of course you want to do this thing. No, like the story of what these characters are about is way more important. Got some notes in here, guys. Timeline bookends. What do you want to?
I mean, like the Star Wars flavors, I think, is the biggest one. You know, when you say that there's 3 thugs approach you, you don't say 3 thugs. You say a mean-looking roadie and an ugly Trandoshan, and then this Doug with a blaster come at you, right? And you just
nice
try and like, I often just glance at like the species page and then just try and remember a few words to throw into my next description of something, because mooks are probably going to be gone. I don't have to remember what they are afterwards. So the timeline bookings is my kind of like more nerdy continuity side coming in a bit, right? But it really helps, I think, with like your internal canon, and like, you know, what you were saying before about the player's canon as well, because like very few of these stories, even though they build all these links together, they don't take place concurrently, or there's so much time. Who knows how long it takes to get to a planet in Star Wars, right? The movies don't know. It seems to take weeks, or it takes a second, or it takes however long the plot demands, right? So it's the same with everything like that. It helps you build the wider world of Star Wars, even within the sort of those broad settings, right? It's like, well, if it's taking place in the Galactic Civil War, is it during A New Hope when it's like the darkest days, or is it during Return of the Jedi where the rebels are pretty much like, you know, running the Imperials, like causing a lot of trouble? Do you think that who are your smugglers going to run into? Is it going to be the New Republic or the Empire? And just the period that you're playing in tighter on even helps you bring your characters back in different series and sketch out like what happened to them in between, kind of stuff, you know? Like my character was a rookie and then became a grizzled veteran after the long years of the Galactic Civil War. And I think my last point was something that I've sort of noodled around with you guys a bit, and it's more vague, but like, you know, I think at the crux of Star Wars is it's an evil empire, there are dark forces, and there are people who are brave and hopeful, a new hope against it. You know, it is that whole Tolkien-esque almost, kind of like the forces of light and the forces of dark. And that's the Star Wars backdrop ultimately as well, right? Is that like even in the times of peace that you'll be talking about that confrontation, that conflict kind of stuff. And even if you're just playing in the margins of it, it's sort of at the heart of the series.
It is, even though we've got the Hutt cartels and the bounty of the weeks, it is important to make space for that. There are some people who want to play the goody good bounty hunter, and putting in that moral choice is important to engage them and pull them into whatever's on the table at the time.
Also means that you can have some extremely camp villains and it's just completely within tone.
It's true. It is so true. We're coming near the end of the hour, and this is the last slide before we ask for questions. This is just a quick for tips for new players, returning players. Because of the Gauntlet's function, you never know who will sign up. who has time for it, who has the interest level in it. People who would sign up for a cartel game may not sign up for, something that's a little more fluffy and the like. So you need to make space for brand new people who come in, make sure that they are welcome. And sometimes if they seem uncomfortable, like really angle stuff towards them until they start to respond, and then everybody else will fall into place. It's Gauntlet, so we're lucky in that this is a community that will make space for new folks and are very, very welcoming. I mean, I've got players who are stalwarts. I'll often see them in Star Wars Saturdays games, and I know they're going to help me take care of a new player, but that's just an important part of making it welcoming, because I love new ideas. Like Cisco joined us last year and came out of nowhere with like a ball of fury, and I just love when he's able to make it to our games. And I just love every time new blood comes in, because they have different take on Star Wars, different things that they're interested in. Returning players are also important. Returning player characters are also really cool, trying to make sure that there's a comic book approach to continuity. So like Will said, we do want to have things happen within that timeline, but I don't want to be dogmatic about it, because then it can be a little off-putting, because then it's like a game between me and this one player and their one player character. Like the side story of this is a cool thing that we did is like 2 minutes. That's my mental limit on it before it becomes, just for lack of a better term, a little masturbatory. So I try to speed us along to like, now we're playing this game. But people will often want to bring in new player characters too. And I think that's fun because they want to explore a new story. And so try to tell the story of the PCs. They are the stars. Be a pack rat. I have all the character keepers for every game. And occasionally if, say, Undish is playing this character from 2 years ago, I'll go look at that character keeper. What were some NPCs in there? What was the like dangling plot thread from that? And I'll literally bring it back.
I go back through every single one of the games I've played in my notes, and I'm like, which NPC can I turn into a PC for this game?
So good. I see a note here about think about the Jedi elephant in the room. Anyone want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, neither of us ever, we've spoken about like choose really to play the Jedi in a game most of the time. But like as we talk, like you have the Force in there, you have bits of Jedi, you might have appearances by people, but like Jedi in the Star Wars narratives that we see are the protagonists, right? The clear protagonists, and like they're superheroes. They don't fit with like the specifics of a lot of the games that we're running in to have this one power guy with superpowers. So we have like Force sensitives, and we have, but you never see someone like, even like Luke in Empire Strikes Back, I would say would be like pushing the top tier of a PC character typically compared to the rest. So it's a big part of Star Wars. I love lightsabers. I love the Jedi. Like I played so much Jedi Knight, it's coming out of my ears, but is that going to create like tension and drama at the table? In some systems it will do, but I think it's definitely something you have to think of rather than just try and shoehorn a Jedi into everything, or like leave it on the table all the time.
Or like Steven's done for upcoming Star Wars Saturdays, have all the PCs be Jedi. This is a great answer. That way it's all power balanced. You're all Jedi. Go with your lightsabers and do awesome stuff. All right. Ask us anything about Star Wars Saturdays. I'm checking the panel channel. I don't see that any questions came through. Let me check the chat here. Do we have any questions that folks want to ask? Oh, hacks that didn't go so well. That's a good one. Hacks that didn't go so well is a tough one. There are times when I thought going in that, this genre will work just great, but it's not always. I had a little list that I had. Have any of that you've played in, Undish, not felt like, were there bits where it didn't work as well for you than you expected?
Not really, not that I can recall. We did have some issues, I think, but that was more mechanical when we played the World War One reskin. I don't remember is it the Ross rifles or something?
Oh yeah, Ross rifles. Yeah, because of the time frame. This was supposed to be like a World War II thing, right? And World War One. Sorry, World War One Ross rifles. We did as Republic rifles, and that was a tough one.
Yeah, but I think that was more game mechanical things that it didn't feel Star Warsy, because I think it did.
I think like
I
with
don't remember anything that's not felt like
well,
Star Wars.
like with Cartel, right? Like the bits that didn't feel right, we chopped them out because enough of it felt right
Yeah.
to carry on with. You know, and something like Dogs in the Vineyard, like the Before the Rebellion or whatever it was called, I just didn't like. You know, I just don't like Dogs in the Vineyard. It turns out, like that's just not my jam. But I did enjoy the game. I think it suited well.
Yeah, well, that's where Peyton Finn came from, our
Exactly.
medic.
Yeah. But maybe like Rust Talks, like the ship side of it doesn't perhaps like fit with the pulpy sort of actiony sort of side of Star Wars. You know, it changes, but then the other side of it does. I think that, but you know, I think that the games that we do end up bringing to the table in Star Wars at least work well enough to run a game and enjoy it, even if it's not one that you'll return back to or something you'll have to change quite a bit, right? Like Copperhead County, I got that and I was really interested in converting that, but then looking at it, I'm like, I think that the themes of this game are too baked into the whole concept of it for me to really change it to a Star Wars one suitably. You know, like
Yeah.
it's quite specific to a place and a time and an area, like the New South politics. And by the point I've reskinned it, what's the point?
Right. Now you've just basically got a bare bones Force in the Dark game. And why don't you just start from there?
Yeah.
Or why don't you do Scum and Villainy? I've heard that's really good.
Stars in the Dark now, yeah.
Hunt the Wicked and Void Vultures are probably two games that for me didn't work as well as I'd hoped. Void Vultures is really fun, but it's built for map combat and dice tricks, and I just had trouble as a GM GMing it. So I don't think it was that it was in Star Wars. It was just not the game for me. And then Hunt the Wicked had some resource management aspects of the game that seemed to be a challenge to the play group. So while it's a really good bounty hunter RPG, it's the one I did before I went to Monster of the Week, it didn't work as well for me. Undish, you see any other questions out there?
Yeah, there's I think it's Kai who asked about how do you find that new content affects your games?
Because it's as they say, it's a major property with living content,
Yeah.
right? So like Star Wars stuff comes out while we're playing Star Wars some days, right? And like it carries on. I think it helps that we're big enough Star Wars nerds that we're aware of like the expanded universe and the whole concept of dealing with, and you know, comic book fans to an you know, helps as well, right? Because you're used to a new thing comes out that completely contradicts your mental canon of whatever's happening here, right? I'll be honest, like I don't think the new Star Wars content has affected like any of my mental stuff because we're still playing in that nice sweet spot between Return of the Jedi and the first of the new movies and The Mandalorian even 5 years later. And the other games and everything, like you never lean on any of the things that, you know, it's continuity nod rather than a heavy canon kind of stuff, you know. I think that's really the key to the living content to me, is that like big things change, but they always leave enough spaces to fill in the gaps.
I think it also helps that with specifically with Star Wars that you've had the big EU revision, that it's been relegated to the legend status or whatever you call it. So it's already a bit soft, you know. Some things exist and some things don't that used to exist. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to have in your particular game. There's also a question about systems or genres that or settings that would be a challenge to convert to Star Wars, and the example was Urban Shadows. And yeah, I think urban fantasy doesn't fit very well just because anything that centers on magic in any way would have to be translated to the Force, and that doesn't always work. Sometimes it maps over okay, but often it doesn't. And I think urban fantasy, that would be very, very difficult. Maybe some Old Republic stuff you could do where you have more Sith and Jedi running around, but I don't think it would work very well.
Urban Shadows and Monster Hearts have been two games that people have asked in the past, and they're two that I've never even attempted. I played a good bit of them, but yeah, no.
And Cisco,
And both Cisco and Kai are asking about like major property with living content game series. I think that's a whole other panel.
I think filling your game, it's, Star Wars is big and broad and pulpy, so I think it has, and loads of the people who play in the Star Wars games are super into Star Wars, but not everyone is. There's a lot of people who are into just playing the RPGs and everything, right? But in the same way they would be on all the other Gauntlet games, like good people, good gaming systems and whatever, right? But like if you look at Gauntlet Comics, our other shared world, those sessions always fill up really fast because people like superheroes, it turns out. Who would have thought? And the people who like superheroes really like superheroes. They're also like both broad in that you can do a lot of different games, a lot of settings, that's what helps you build a living content, is you got that looser feel. I've played in other living content sort of things like Delta Green. I played in a living content world at the shared universe of that, and that kind of worked as long as they were like, because everybody is secret and no one knows really what's going on, and anybody who does know what's going on probably dies, goes insane, or gets killed because they know too much. It works there, but then you've got like the World of Darkness style, where it's like no matter what you've done in a game, none of it matters because Kane has awoken, and that's the end of it, right? And I think it's what gives you the most flexibility, and it's what sells. And what we see selling is also like what people want to play, what they want to do, what we all enjoy, what we're passionate about.
I think it helps having a setting that's big. Like Star Wars is huge, but both in time and space. Thousands of years of history, if you want to. You have a whole galaxy. You can always set something on some planet where nobody knows what's going on in a time period that hasn't been explored much. The Marvel universe is a similar example because you have parallel timelines and you have space civilizations, and there are literally thousands of named characters that have been introduced over the years. You have like different continuities and takes on the characters for over decades with different writers. So you can always say, I'm playing inspired by this particular piece of thing. So I think it's more difficult if you do something like where you have a very focused cast.
Yeah, Farscape has been a mixed bag for me. I love the game, but running as an RPG has been a mixed bag. I'd say 50-50 success, really, with that in particular. Some people just want to play the Farscape cast, because that's what the show was all about.
That's all you've seen, really, of the world of Farscape, isn't it? It's the experience of the people of Firefly. And I feel like it'd be the same way in Firefly. I'd always just pretty much want to be playing a Serenity knockoff. I wouldn't be that interested in playing anything else. I can't conceive of it particularly. Kai's got a question about what systems are we looking forward to playing in 2022? I think
that's a great last question. Yeah, absolutely. So let's end on that one. What are a few systems that you are interested in?
Anders, do you have any that you're lotting forward to running, other than more Stars in the Dark?
Yeah, I want to do a complicated profession, which is, I think it's a Firebrands game. I'm not super familiar with Firebrands. That's about bounty hunters who have stopped being bounty hunters because the drones do all the jobs. So they've become, they've started a luxury cruise service instead. So their service turned to the service industry. That seems like a fun, fairly light-hearted game that would work well for Star Wars. I think you just rename some things and you're there.
So it reminds me of Squeakeasy, a thing that I would never have considered, but like, why not in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah. Well, that was Jamie's deal last Star Wars Saturday's special edition, and I was like, really?
Yeah,
it sounded awesome.
And that came back in again in a series of Hook Cartel. But for me, it's more Bounty of the Week, more Hook Cartel if Magpie releases the Cold War stuff, or when they do, I'm sure they will. And I'm still toying with how exactly I want to tweak it, but Alan Reese's Against the Dark Conspiracy, I want to turn it into Against the Empire, because I think it really has something good for, like rebel contacts and being sort of undercover and against a overwhelming force, doing secret missions and stuff. But it is built around the idea that you're fighting a conspiracy, and the Empire is not a conspiracy. So the easy option is to do the Imperial conspiracy, but then I'm like, but I want the Stormies and the Star Destroyers and the things like that,
Right. For me in 2022, some of the things I'm looking forward to, there's a game called Road Trip that it even has within the road trip game. While it is a road trip, it has a couple pictures of people running aboard a freighter, so it's already built to be Star Wars. Laser Ritter is a game that I've found on itch that looks very promising and interesting. Rascals is a card-based Spec Op Forces RPG that's also sci-fi kind of space opera that Kai turned me on to, that I'm going to be running. And then Donna just ran Terps, which is technically a LARP from Jason Morningstar, but is about interpreters who come into an area that is basically the United States in Afghanistan, the game. I really want to see if that could be Star Warsified. So that sounds more on the cartel vein, but I'm looking forward to watching the YouTube recording of that game to see, could I make it happen, or is it just going to make me too sad? But that's it. There are a lot of games out there, and of course, returning stuff from previous, more Bounty of the Week, more Cartel, more Stars of the Dark, all the fun stuff. Thanks for coming to our Star Wars Saturdays presentation, everyone. We really appreciate your time and your questions and your participation. Will, Undish, thank you guys for stepping in to co-host or co-panel with me. It was really fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Listeners, we want to let you know that Hearts of Wulin, our PBTA game of wuxia melodrama, is now available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG. Hearts of Wulin emulates films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Shadow, and TV series like The Untamed and Ancient Detective. It is inspired by the Chinese martial arts novels of Jin Yong and Gu Long and their many adaptations. In these tales, romance is as dangerous as a blade. You can buy Hearts of Wulin at the Gauntlet store on DriveThruRPG. You can find more information and resources for it on our Gauntlet blog, on the Gauntlet webpage at gauntlet-rpg.com.